The black flight attendant was fired for helping a disabled passenger. But when the CEO invited him to her office, Marcus Johnson stood at the employee entrance of Skyline Airlines, his fingers tracing the outline of his employee badge one last time before surrendering it to security. At 35, Marcus had thought he'd found his calling as a flight attendant, a job that allowed him to combine his natural warmth and his love for travel. His dark skin gleamed with a sheen of nervous sweat as he contemplated the sudden turn his life had taken. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, Marcus had always dreamed of seeing the world. His parents, both factory workers, had instilled in him a strong work ethic and a deep sense of compassion for others. These values had served him well in his 7 years with Skyline Airlines, earning him numerous commendations for his exceptional customer service. Marcus's colleagues often joked that he had a sixth sense for passengers in distress. Whether it was a nervous first-time flyer or a harried parent struggling with young children, Marcus always seemed to appear at just the right moment with a kind word or a helping hand. His easy smile and calm demeanor had a way of diffusing tense situations, making him a favorite among both passengers and crew. But now, as he handed over his badge, Marcus felt a deep sense of injustice. The very qualities that had made him an exemplary employee had led to his termination. He couldn't help but wonder if the color of his skin had played a role in the harsh punishment he'd received for what he believed was simply doing his job. Across town in the executive suite of Skyline Airlines corporate headquarters, CEO Victoria Reeves was reviewing the day's reports. At 50, Victoria had clawed her way to the top of the male-dominated airline industry through sheer determination and business acumen. Her steel-gray hair and sharp blue eyes gave her an intimidating presence, one she used to full effect in boardroom battles. Victoria prided herself on running a tight ship. Skyline Airlines' reputation for efficiency and profitability was directly attributed to her no-nonsense leadership style. She had little patience for employees who deviated from company policy, believing that rules were essential for maintaining the airline's stellar safety record and bottom line. As she scanned the daily incident reports, one particular case caught her eye. A flight attendant had been terminated for violating company policy regarding assistance to disabled passengers. Victoria's brow furrowed as she read the details. Something about this case didn't sit right with her, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Little did Marcus or Victoria know that their paths were about to cross in a way that would challenge their beliefs, shake the foundations of Skyline Airlines, and set in motion a series of events that would have far-reaching consequences for both of them and the entire company. The day that would change everything had started like any other for Marcus Johnson. He arrived at O'Hare International Airport 2 hours before his scheduled flight to San Francisco, going through his pre-flight routine with practiced ease. As he helped prepare the cabin for boarding, Marcus chatted amiably with his fellow crew members, his infectious optimism setting a positive tone for the flight ahead. As passengers began to board, Marcus took his position near the front of the plane, greeting each person with a warm smile and a helpful hand with carry-on luggage. About halfway through the boarding process, he noticed an elderly woman making her way slowly down the jet bridge, her gait unsteady and her face etched with discomfort. "Welcome aboard, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice gentle. "Can I assist you to your seat?" The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, gratefully accepted his offer. As Marcus helped her down the aisle, she confided that she had a chronic back condition that made walking and sitting for long periods extremely painful. Her seat was in the middle of the economy section, and Marcus could see the worry in her eyes as she contemplated the long flight ahead. Without hesitation, Marcus made a decision. "Mrs. Thompson," he said quietly, "I think we might be able to make you more comfortable. Let me see what I can do." Marcus approached the lead flight attendant, explaining Mrs. Thompson's situation and suggesting they move her to one of the empty seats in the first-class cabin where she would have more room to adjust her position during the flight. The lead attendant, however, was hesitant. "You know the policy, Marcus," she said with a frown. "We can't upgrade passengers without proper authorization. She'll have to stay in her assigned seat." Marcus felt a knot of frustration in his stomach. He looked back at Mrs. Thompson, who was now seated but visibly uncomfortable, and made a split-second decision. "I'll take responsibility," he said. "We can't just leave her like that for a 5-hour flight." Despite the lead attendant's protests, Marcus gently helped Mrs. Thompson to an empty first-class seat, ensuring she was comfortable and had everything she needed for the journey. The gratitude in her eyes as she settled into the spacious seat only reinforced Marcus's belief that he had done the right thing. However, as the flight progressed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his actions would have consequences. His fears were confirmed when, upon landing in San Francisco, he was immediately called to a meeting with the station manager. The manager, a stern-faced man named Mr. Bradshaw, didn't mince words. "Johnson, we've received a report that you upgraded a passenger without authorization. Is this true?" Marcus took a deep breath and explained the situation with Mrs. Thompson, emphasizing her medical condition and his belief that it was in the best interest of both the passenger and the airline to ensure her comfort. Mr. Bradshaw's expression remained impassive. "While your intentions may have been good, you directly violated company policy. This is a serious infraction, Johnson. I'm afraid we'll have to terminate your employment, effective immediately." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He tried to argue his case, pointing out his spotless record and numerous commendations, but Mr. Bradshaw was unmoved. As Marcus turned in his badge and gathered his belongings, he couldn't help but notice that none of his colleagues would meet his eye. He wondered if a white flight attendant would have faced the same harsh punishment for a similar act of compassion. As he left the airport, still in shock from the sudden turn of events, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Mrs. Thompson, thanking him profusely for his kindness during the flight and expressing how much it had meant to her. The message only deepened Marcus's sense of injustice. He had lost his job for simply trying to help someone in need. Little did Marcus know that his act of kindness, and the severe response it had prompted, was about to set off a chain of events that would ripple through Skyline Airlines and beyond. As he hailed a taxi to take him to his hotel, still reeling from the day's events, the stage was set for a conflict that would challenge not just one company's policies, but the very nature of customer service and corporate responsibility in the airline industry. In the days following Marcus Johnson's termination, an unexpected series of events began to unfold. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, the passenger Marcus had helped, was not just a typical traveler. She was a well-known travel blogger with a substantial following, particularly among senior citizens and disabled travelers. Upset by the treatment Marcus had received for his act of kindness, Mrs. Thompson wrote a detailed account of her experience on her blog. She praised Marcus's compassion and criticized Skyline Airlines' rigid policies and harsh response. The post quickly went viral, shared thousands of times across various social media platforms. As the story spread, other passengers came forward with their own accounts of Marcus's exceptional service. Stories poured in of how he had calmed anxious children, assisted elderly passengers, and gone above and beyond to ensure everyone's comfort and safety. The contrast between these glowing testimonials and the company's decision to fire him for an act of kindness struck a chord with the public. Civil rights organizations took notice, questioning whether racial bias had played a role in the severity of Marcus's punishment. They pointed out a pattern of disproportionate disciplinary actions against employees of color at Skyline Airlines and other major carriers. The mounting public relations crisis finally caught the attention of CEO Victoria Reeves. As she delved deeper into the case, she made a startling discovery. The policy Marcus had violated was outdated and inconsistent with the airline's stated commitment to passenger comfort and satisfaction. In fact, it had been slated for review and revision months ago. But the process had been delayed due to bureaucratic red tape. Victoria also uncovered a troubling pattern in the enforcement of company policies. A quick audit revealed that white employees who had committed similar or even more serious infractions had often received nothing more than a warning or a short suspension. The realization that unconscious bias might be permeating her company's culture shook Victoria to her core. As she continued to investigate, Victoria found herself reflecting on her own journey to the top. She had faced discrimination and bias throughout her career, fighting tooth and nail to prove herself in a male-dominated industry. Somewhere along the way, in her drive to succeed and her focus on the bottom line, she had lost sight of the human element of her business. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Victoria received an email from her own mother. Unaware of the controversy surrounding the airline, her mother wrote to tell her about a wonderful flight attendant who had gone out of his way to make her comfortable on a recent Skyline flight. The description matched Marcus perfectly. This personal connection to the story struck Victoria deeply. She realized that Marcus was exactly the kind of employee Skyline Airlines needed. Someone who understood that the true measure of a company's success was not just in its profits, but in its ability to serve and care for its customers. The revelation was both painful and illuminating. Victoria saw that in her pursuit of efficiency and profitability, she had created a culture that stifled compassion and individual initiative. Marcus's case was not just about one employee or one incident. It was a symptom of a larger problem that permeated the entire organization. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Victoria knew she was at a crossroads. She could try to weather the PR storm and maintain the status quo, or she could use this as an opportunity for genuine change and growth. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: nothing at Skyline Airlines would ever be the same again. Victoria Reeves sat in her office, the weight of her recent discoveries pressing heavily on her shoulders. The story of Marcus Johnson's firing had exploded into a full-blown crisis, threatening not just Skyline Airlines' reputation, but also its financial stability, as customers began to boycott the airline in droves. She knew she had to act, and act decisively. After hours of intense deliberation and consultation with her executive team, Victoria made a decision that would alter the course of her company and her own career. She would not only reinstate Marcus Johnson, but also create a new position for him: Director of Customer Experience and Inclusivity. This role would give Marcus the authority to reshape Skyline's approach to customer service, with a particular focus on accommodating passengers with special needs or disabilities. Furthermore, Victoria decided to use this incident as a catalyst for a company-wide overhaul of policies and practices. She would commission an independent audit of all disciplinary actions over the past 5 years to identify any patterns of bias and implement a comprehensive diversity and inclusion training program for all employees. The consequences of Victoria's decision were immediate and far-reaching. The announcement of Marcus's reinstatement and new role was met with a mixture of reactions within the company. Many employees, particularly those who had worked with Marcus, were thrilled. They saw it as a sign that compassion and initiative would be valued over rigid adherence to outdated rules. However, there was also significant pushback. Some executives argued that Victoria was overreacting to public pressure, setting a dangerous precedent that could undermine disciplinary procedures in the future. Middle managers, many of whom had been responsible for enforcing the very policies now under scrutiny, felt threatened and defensive. Externally, the response was largely positive. Civil rights organizations cautiously praised Skyline for taking concrete steps to address issues of bias, while customer service experts hailed the move as a bold step towards a more passenger-centric approach in the airline industry. The financial markets, however, were less enthusiastic. Skyline's stock took a hit as investors worried about the costs of the proposed changes and the potential for disruption to the company's operations. Victoria found herself having to defend her decision to the board of directors, arguing passionately that this short-term pain was necessary for the long-term health and growth of the company. As Victoria worked to implement her plan, she encountered numerous challenges. The audit of past disciplinary actions uncovered uncomfortable truths about systemic bias within the company, leading to difficult conversations and, in some cases, the need to make personnel changes in key positions. The development of new customer service policies, led by Marcus, was met with resistance from various departments. The legal team worried about potential liabilities, while operations managers argued that some of the proposed changes would be logistically impossible to implement. Victoria also faced personal consequences for her decision. She received hate mail from individuals who accused her of caving to political correctness. And even some of her longtime mentors in the industry expressed disappointment in what they saw as a departure from her usually hard-nosed business approach. Despite these challenges, Victoria remained committed to her course of action. She worked closely with Marcus, often late into the night, to refine and implement the new initiatives. As the weeks passed, small signs of positive change began to emerge. Employee morale, which had taken a hit during the initial controversy, began to improve as staff saw that their input was being genuinely valued in the reform process. Customer satisfaction scores, which had plummeted after the incident, slowly started to climb as passengers experienced the effects of the new, more empathetic approach to service. One particularly powerful moment came when Victoria received a letter from a passenger with a mobility impairment. The passenger wrote about how a Skyline flight attendant, inspired by Marcus's story, had gone out of her way to ensure his comfort during a long flight. The letter ended with the words, "For the first time in years, I felt like a valued customer rather than a burden or an inconvenience." As Victoria read the letter, she felt a mixture of pride and humility. Pride in the positive impact their changes were beginning to have, and humility in the realization of how much work still lay ahead. The journey was far from over. Victoria knew that truly transforming the culture of a large corporation would take time, persistence, and a willingness to face ongoing challenges. There would be more difficult decisions to make, more resistance to overcome, and likely more mistakes to learn from along the way. But as she looked at a photo on her desk, a snapshot of her standing with Marcus and a group of employees at a recent town hall meeting, Victoria felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had taken a risk, chosen compassion and long-term vision over short-term expediency, and in doing so had set Skyline Airlines on a new and promising path. The consequences of her decision were still unfolding, but Victoria was increasingly confident that she had made the right choice. Not just for Marcus Johnson, not just for Skyline Airlines, but for the future of an industry that touched millions of lives every day. As Victoria Reeves and Marcus Johnson worked to implement changes at Skyline Airlines, a secondary plot was unfolding within the company. Sarah Chen, a young flight attendant of Asian descent, found herself unexpectedly at the center of this parallel narrative. Sarah had always kept her head down, doing her job efficiently, but rarely standing out. The daughter of immigrants, she had been raised to believe that the key to success was to work hard and avoid making waves. But Marcus's story and the subsequent changes in company policy had sparked something in her. During a particularly challenging flight, Sarah encountered a passenger who was struggling with severe anxiety. Drawing inspiration from Marcus's example, she went beyond standard procedures to comfort the passenger, even spending her break talking the woman through relaxation techniques. The passenger was so impressed that she wrote a glowing letter to the company, praising Sarah's exceptional care. This letter made its way to Marcus, who was now reviewing customer feedback as part of his new role. Intrigued by Sarah's actions, Marcus reached out to her. As they talked, he realized that Sarah had a wealth of ideas for improving customer service, particularly for passengers from diverse cultural backgrounds. Her own experiences as a child translating for her parents had given her unique insights into the challenges faced by non-native English speakers when navigating air travel. Marcus encouraged Sarah to develop her ideas into a formal proposal. Initially hesitant, Sarah found herself drawn into the excitement of potentially making a real difference. She spent her free time researching, gathering data, and refining her concepts. As Sarah worked on her proposal, she began to notice things she had previously overlooked. She saw how the airline's current practices sometimes inadvertently marginalized certain groups of passengers. She also observed her fellow flight attendants, noting the subtle differences in how they interacted with passengers of different races and backgrounds. Sarah's project caught the attention of Victoria Reeves, who saw in it an opportunity to further Skyline's commitment to inclusivity. Victoria assigned a small team to work with Sarah, turning her proposal into a comprehensive cultural competency training program for all customer-facing staff. This development, however, was not without its challenges. Some of Sarah's colleagues resented what they saw as special treatment. Whispers of diversity hire and playing the race card began to circulate. Sarah, who had always strived to blend in, suddenly found herself thrust into the spotlight. The pressure began to take its toll on Sarah. She struggled with self-doubt, wondering if she was out of her depth. The once confident flight attendant found herself second-guessing her every decision. It was during this difficult time that Sarah found an unexpected ally in Marcus. Recognizing the signs of burnout and imposter syndrome, Marcus took Sarah under his wing. He shared his own experiences of facing discrimination and self-doubt, offering guidance on how to navigate the complex dynamics of being a minority in a leadership position. With Marcus's mentorship and Victoria's support, Sarah found her footing. Her cultural competency program became a cornerstone of Skyline's new training curriculum, earning praise from both employees and industry experts. As Sarah's star rose within the company, her story began to intertwine more closely with the larger narrative of Skyline's transformation. She became a symbol of the positive changes happening within the airline, a living example of how creating space for diverse voices could lead to innovation and improved customer service. The secondary plot of Sarah's journey added depth to Skyline's story of change. It highlighted the ripple effects of Marcus's initial act of kindness and Victoria's decision to champion inclusivity. Through Sarah, the company was discovering the untapped potential within its own ranks, proving that a commitment to diversity could drive meaningful progress in unexpected ways. As the cultural competency program rolled out across the airline, Sarah's confidence grew. She began to see herself not just as a flight attendant, but as a change-maker. Her journey from reluctant participant to passionate advocate mirrored Skyline's own transformation, adding a personal, relatable dimension to the company's broader narrative of growth and inclusion. The evolving relationship between Victoria Reeves, Marcus Johnson, and Sarah Chen became the cornerstone of Skyline Airlines' transformation. What had begun as a crisis management situation gradually developed into a dynamic partnership that would reshape the company's culture and operations. Victoria, once known for her aloof leadership style, found herself increasingly drawn into the day-to-day work of implementing change. She began to hold regular meetings with Marcus and Sarah, creating an open forum for ideas and concerns. These sessions, initially tense and formal, gradually evolved into lively discussions where hierarchy took a backseat to innovation and problem-solving. For Victoria, this new approach to leadership was both challenging and invigorating. She had to learn to listen more than she spoke, to consider perspectives she had previously overlooked. There were moments of frustration when her instinct for quick, decisive action clashed with the more nuanced, collaborative approach favored by Marcus and Sarah. One particularly heated discussion centered around the allocation of resources for diversity initiatives. Victoria, ever mindful of the bottom line, argued for a more conservative approach. Marcus pushed back, passionately advocating for comprehensive changes. It was Sarah who ultimately bridged the gap, proposing a phased implementation that addressed Victoria's financial concerns while still achieving Marcus's goals. This incident marked a turning point in their relationship. Victoria realized that her role was not to have all the answers, but to create an environment where the best ideas could flourish, regardless of where they came from. She began to see Marcus and Sarah not just as employees, but as partners in Skyline's transformation. Marcus, for his part, had to navigate the transition from frontline employee to executive. He struggled initially with the bureaucratic aspects of his new role, often growing impatient with the slow pace of corporate decision-making. It was Victoria who helped him understand the complexities of running a large organization, teaching him to balance his passion for change with the realities of business operations. A pivotal moment came when Marcus had to make a difficult decision regarding an employee who had violated the new inclusivity policies. He found himself torn between his instinct for compassion and his responsibility to enforce the very standards he had helped create. A late-night conversation with Victoria helped him find a way to be firm yet fair. upholding the policy while also creating a path for the employee to learn and improve. Sarah's relationship with both Victoria and Marcus deepened as she grew into her role as a change agent within the company. She found in Victoria a role model for female leadership in a male-dominated industry. Victoria's mentorship helped Sarah navigate the corporate landscape, teaching her to assert her ideas confidently and handle pushback constructively. With Marcus, Sarah developed a bond rooted in their shared experiences as minorities in the airline industry. They often found themselves staying late at the office, sharing stories of the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, discrimination they had faced. These conversations not only strengthened their friendship, but also informed their approach to Skyline's inclusivity initiatives, ensuring they addressed the real-world experiences of employees from diverse backgrounds. As the trio worked closely together, they began to develop a shorthand, able to communicate complex ideas with just a look or a nod. Their complementary strengths, Victoria's strategic thinking, Marcus's people skills, and Sarah's analytical approach, created a synergy that drove Skyline's transformation forward at an impressive pace. Sarah looked up from her notes. But how do we convince them? The shareholders, they only care about profits, not people. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. It was Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, the passenger whose blog post had started it all. She had been invited to speak at the meeting, to provide a customer's perspective on the changes at Skyline. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, her kind eyes taking in the tense scene. "I just wanted to thank you all again for everything you've done. You've not only changed Skyline, you've changed the entire industry. I've heard from so many people who feel like they can fly with dignity now." Her words seemed to re-energize the room. Victoria squared her shoulders, a new resolve in her eyes. "Mrs. Thompson is right. What we're doing here is bigger than just Skyline. It's about changing the way the entire industry thinks about service and inclusion." As they filed into the auditorium, the tension was palpable. Shareholders muttered among themselves, their eyes darting between the executive team and the protesters still visible through the windows. Victoria took the stage first, her voice clear and confident as she presented the financial results. While profits had taken a hit initially, customer satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and long-term projections showed strong growth potential. Marcus followed, passionately outlining the changes they'd made and the positive impact on both employees and customers. Sarah presented hard data showing improved efficiency and reduced turnover rates as a result of their inclusivity initiatives. But it was Mrs. Thompson's speech that truly turned the tide. She spoke movingly about her experience with Marcus and how it had made her feel truly valued as a customer for the first time in years. As she described how Skyline's changes had made air travel accessible and comfortable for her and many others with disabilities, the mood in the room began to shift. When the Q&A session began, James Bartlett stood up, his face red with anger. "This is all well and good," he sputtered, "but what about the real Skyline employees? The ones who've been passed over for promotions in favor of diversity hires?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah. How they handled this moment would determine not just the outcome of the meeting, but the future of everything they had worked for. Victoria stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Bartlett, I'm glad you brought this up, because it gives us a chance to address the heart of what we're trying to do here at Skyline." This evolving dynamic did not go unnoticed by the rest of the company. Employees watched as their CEO engaged in animated discussions with a former flight attendant and a rising star from the ranks. The sight of Victoria Reeves laughing over lunch with Marcus and Sarah in the staff cafeteria did more to signal real culture change than any official memo could have. However, the development of this relationship also faced challenges. There were whispers of favoritism, concerns about the consolidation of influence among a small group. Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah had to work hard to remain transparent in their decision-making and inclusive in their approach, constantly reaching out to other employees for input and feedback. As they navigated these challenges together, their bond grew stronger. They celebrated wins together, like the successful launch of Sarah's Cultural Competency Program, and supported each other through setbacks. When Marcus received a threatening letter from someone angered by the changes at Skyline, it was Victoria and Sarah who rallied around him, ensuring he felt safe and valued. By the end of the year, the relationship between Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah had become emblematic of the new Skyline Airlines. Their ability to work together across racial, gender, and hierarchical lines set a powerful example for the entire company. As they looked towards the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. A united front committed to creating an airline where everyone could feel valued and respected. The tensions that had been building within Skyline Airlines came to a head on a sweltering summer day, as the company prepared for its annual shareholder meeting. Victoria Reeves, Marcus Johnson, and Sarah Chen had spent months preparing for this moment, knowing that the success or failure of their initiatives would be judged harshly by investors focused primarily on the bottom line. As they made final preparations in a conference room adjacent to the main auditorium, a commotion outside caught their attention. A group of employees, led by James Bartlett, a longtime manager who had been openly critical of the recent changes, was staging a protest. They carried signs decrying reverse discrimination and the destruction of Skyline's values. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. Victoria paced back and forth, her face a mask of concern. Marcus stood by the window, watching the protesters with a mixture of anger and sadness. Sarah sat at the table, frantically making last-minute adjustments to their presentation. "Maybe we've pushed too far too fast," Victoria mused, voicing the doubt that had been nagging at her for weeks. Marcus turned from the window, his jaw set with determination. "No, Victoria, we can't back down now. Everything we've worked for is at stake." As Victoria began to speak, Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look. They knew that this was the moment that would define their journey. Everything hung in the balance as Victoria continued, her words carrying the weight of their shared vision for a more inclusive and compassionate Skyline Airlines. Victoria's voice carried across the auditorium, steady and resolute. "Mr. Bartlett, I want to be very clear about something. Our initiatives are not about favoring one group over another. They're about creating a level playing field where everyone, regardless of their background, has an equal opportunity to succeed." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "We're not lowering our standards. If anything, we're raising them. We're asking all of our employees to stretch beyond their comfort zones, to learn new skills, and to bring their full selves to work." Marcus stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. "I understand the fear of change. Believe me, I've lived it. But I want to share something with all of you." He took a deep breath before continuing. "When I was fired for helping Mrs. Thompson, I felt like my world had ended. But that moment led to all of this. It showed us that our old way of doing things was leaving too many people behind, both our employees and our customers." Sarah, sensing the mood in the room, chimed in. "I used to be one of those employees who just kept my head down and did my job. I was afraid to speak up, to share my ideas, but these changes gave me a voice. And I know I'm not the only one. We're tapping into potential that was always there, but never had a chance to shine." The room was silent, tension thick in the air. Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah stood united, waiting for the response. It came from an unexpected source. An older gentleman in the front row, one of Skyline's longest-serving board members, slowly stood up. "I've been with this company for over 40 years, he began, his voice gravelly with age. "And I've seen a lot of changes, but I have to say, I've never been more proud of Skyline than I am right now." A murmur rippled through the crowd as he continued. "We've always talked about being a leader in the industry. Well, this is what leadership looks like. It's not always comfortable, but it's necessary." His words seemed to break the tension. Other shareholders began to speak up, some sharing personal stories of how the changes had positively impacted their own air travel experiences. Even a few of the protesters, moved by the sincerity of the presentations, began to lower their signs. James Bartlett, however, was not so easily swayed. "This all sounds great in theory," he argued, "but what about the practical realities? How can we ensure that these changes don't compromise our operations or our safety standards?" It was Sarah who answered him. That's a valid concern, Mr. Bartlett, and it's one we've taken very seriously. She outlined the rigorous training programs they had implemented, the new feedback systems that allowed for continuous improvement, and the enhanced safety protocols that had been put in place alongside the inclusivity initiatives. In fact, Sarah added, pulling up a slide filled with data, our safety record has improved since implementing these changes. Turns out, when employees feel valued and heard, they're more likely to speak up about potential issues before they become problems. The presentation of hard data seemed to quell some of the remaining skepticism in the room. Victoria, sensing the shift in mood, made a bold proposal. I understand that these changes have been difficult for some of you, she said, addressing the whole room but looking directly at James Bartlett. So I want to make an offer. We're forming a new advisory committee to help guide the ongoing implementation of our inclusivity initiatives. Mr. Bartlett, I'd like you to be part of it. A gasp went through the crowd. Marcus and Sarah exchanged surprised glances, but quickly rallied behind Victoria's decision. James Bartlett looked stunned. You want me on the committee? But I've been one of your biggest critics. Victoria nodded. Exactly. We don't want an echo chamber, Mr. Bartlett. We want to hear all perspectives to ensure that we're truly creating a skyline that works for everyone. Your concerns are valid, and we want to address them head-on. The gesture seemed to deflate the last of the opposition. Even James Bartlett, after a moment of hesitation, nodded his acceptance. As the meeting concluded, there was a palpable sense of resolution in the air. The shareholders voted overwhelmingly to continue supporting the new initiatives. The protesters outside, hearing of the outcomes, began to disperse, many of them engaging in thoughtful discussions with Skyline employees. Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah found themselves surrounded by well-wishers and curious shareholders, eager to learn more about the changes. As they fielded questions and shared their vision for the future of Skyline, they could feel the energy in the room shift from tension to excitement. Later that evening, as they debriefed in Victoria's office, the three of them finally allowed themselves to relax. I can't quite believe we pulled it off, Sarah said, slumping into a chair. Marcus grinned, the relief evident on his face. It was touch and go for a while there, but I think we've really turned a corner. Victoria nodded, a rare smile softening her features. We have. But this is just the beginning. The real work starts now. As they looked at each other, tired but triumphant, they knew that while they had successfully navigated this conflict, there would be more challenges ahead. But they had proven to themselves and to Skyline that they could face these challenges together, with open minds and a shared commitment to creating a more inclusive and successful airline. The conflict resolution hadn't been easy or perfect, but it had laid the groundwork for a new era at Skyline Airlines. The inclusion of James Bartlett on the advisory committee proved to be a masterstroke. His initial skepticism, when voiced in a constructive environment, often led to robust discussions that strengthened the implementation of new policies. In the weeks that followed, Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah worked tirelessly to build on the momentum generated by the shareholder meeting. They organized town halls with employees at all levels, creating open forums for concerns to be aired and addressed. These meetings weren't always comfortable, but they were crucial in building trust and buy-in across the company. One particularly challenging session focused on the concerns of longtime employees who feared being passed over for promotions. Marcus took the lead in addressing these fears, sharing his own story of growth within the company. This isn't about pushing anyone out, he explained. It's about creating opportunities for everyone to grow and contribute their unique perspectives. Sarah's cultural competency program was rolled out company-wide, with mandatory training sessions for all employees. Initial resistance gave way to engagement, as people began to see the practical benefits of improved communication and understanding across cultural lines. Victoria focused on the business side, working with the finance team to quantify the impact of their initiatives. The numbers were encouraging. Customer satisfaction scores were up, employee turnover was down, and while short-term profits had taken a hit, long-term projections showed significant growth potential. As word of Skyline's transformation spread, they began to receive recognition from unexpected quarters. Industry publications praised their innovative approach to customer service. Civil rights organizations held them up as an example of corporate responsibility done right. Other airlines started to reach out, curious about their methods. However, not all the attention was positive. Competitors, feeling threatened by Skyline's growing reputation, began to push back. There were whisper campaigns suggesting that Skyline's new policies compromised safety or efficiency. Victoria and her team had to be constantly vigilant, ready to counter misinformation with facts and data. The true test came 6 months after the shareholder meeting, when a minor incident on a Skyline flight was blown out of proportion by a competing airline's PR team. They claimed it was evidence that Skyline's new inclusivity policies were distracting from core operations. Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah huddled in crisis mode, knowing their response would be crucial. They decided on a strategy of radical transparency. They released all relevant data about the incident, along with comparative safety statistics that showed Skyline's improved record since implementing the new policies. Marcus appeared on several news programs, calmly explaining the situation and reaffirming Skyline's commitment to both inclusivity and safety. Sarah organized a series of public demonstrations of their new training protocols, inviting media and industry experts to observe. The incident, which had threatened to derail their progress, instead became an opportunity to showcase the strength of their new approach. The public response was overwhelmingly positive, with many customers expressing renewed loyalty to Skyline. As the dust settled, Victoria called a meeting with Marcus and Sarah. "We've weathered this storm," she said, "but we need to be prepared for more. This isn't just about changing Skyline anymore. We're challenging an entire industry's status quo." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but I think we've proven that we're stronger together. Our diverse perspectives are our greatest asset." Sarah, who had grown more confident in voicing her opinions, added, "Maybe it's time we took this to the next level. What if we started reaching out to other airlines, sharing what we've learned? We could lead an industry-wide change." Victoria considered this for a moment, then smiled. "That's ambitious. It won't be easy. But then again, nothing worthwhile ever is. Let's do it." As they began to plan their next moves, all three felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had taken a crisis and turned it into an opportunity for growth and positive change. The road ahead would undoubtedly have more challenges, but they were ready to face them together. The conflict resolution attempt had evolved into something much bigger, a movement for change that extended far beyond the borders of Skyline Airlines. It was a testament to what could be achieved when diversity, inclusivity, and business acumen worked in harmony. The decision to reach out to other airlines marked a significant turning point for Skyline and its leadership team. It represented a shift from internal transformation to industry-wide influence, a bold move that would redefine their mission and impact. Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah began by organizing a summit on inclusivity and innovation in the airline industry. They invited executives, employees, and customers from airlines around the world, as well as industry experts and civil rights leaders. The response was overwhelming. The summit, initially planned as a modest gathering, quickly grew into a major event. Airlines that had once been fierce competitors were now coming together to learn from Skyline's experience and share their own challenges and successes. During the summit, Marcus delivered a keynote speech that electrified the audience. He shared his personal journey from fired employee to executive, weaving it into a larger narrative about the power of inclusivity to drive innovation and growth. The standing ovation he received was a clear sign that his message had resonated deeply. Sarah led a series of workshops on implementing cultural competency programs, drawing on her experiences at Skyline to provide practical advice and strategies. Her sessions were consistently overbooked, with attendees praising her accessible approach to a complex topic. Victoria, for her part, focused on making the business case for inclusivity. She presented data showing how Skyline's initiatives had improved not just employee satisfaction and customer experience, but also the bottom line. Her hard numbers and strategic insights helped convince even the most skeptical executives that inclusivity was not just a moral imperative, but a business necessity. As the summit concluded, There was a palpable sense of excitement and possibility in the air. Several airlines expressed interest in partnering with Skyline to implement similar programs. Industry publications hailed the event as a watershed moment in aviation history. In the wake of the summit's success, Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah found themselves at another crossroads. They had an opportunity to position Skyline not just as an airline, but as a leader in corporate inclusivity and innovation across industries. After much discussion, they decided to establish the Skyline Institute for Inclusive Leadership, a think tank and training center dedicated to promoting inclusivity in the corporate world. This new direction would allow them to extend their impact far beyond the airline industry, while continuing to drive innovation within Skyline. As they stood together, looking out over the skyline of the city, Victoria turned to Marcus and Sarah. "When you first came into my office," she said, "I never could have imagined we'd end up here. But I can't think of two people I'd rather have on this journey with me." Marcus smiled, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "It's been quite a ride, and something tells me we're just getting started." Sarah nodded in agreement. "We've come so far, but there's still so much to do. I can't wait to see what we'll achieve next." As they turned to head back inside, all three felt a sense of excitement for the new chapter that was beginning. They had taken a moment of crisis and turned it into a movement for change, not just for Skyline, but for the entire corporate world. The future was uncertain, but full of possibility, and they were ready to face it together. As the Skyline Institute for Inclusive Leadership took shape, Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah found themselves reflecting on their personal journeys and the profound changes they had undergone. Victoria, once known for her hard-nosed business approach, had discovered a new dimension to leadership. She realized that true strength came not from maintaining an iron grip on control, but from empowering others and fostering an environment of open communication and mutual respect. One evening, as she was leaving the office, she paused to chat with the janitorial staff, something she would never have done in the past. As she listened to their stories and concerns, she was struck by the wealth of perspective she had been missing all these years. "I've spent my career climbing to the top," she thought, "but I'm only now learning to see the whole picture." Marcus's growth had been equally profound. From a flight attendant who had felt powerless in the face of unjust policies, he had become a respected leader and an inspiration to many. But with this new status came new challenges. He found himself grappling with the weight of responsibility, knowing that his words and actions now had far-reaching consequences. During a mentoring session with a young employee, Marcus shared his struggles. "There are days when I wonder if I'm doing enough, if I'm living up to everyone's expectations," he admitted. The employee's response, "But sir, you've already changed so much just by being here," reminded Marcus of the power of representation and the importance of his journey. Sarah's transformation had been perhaps the most dramatic. The once shy flight attendant who had been afraid to rock the boat had become a confident, innovative leader. She now routinely presented to large audiences and was not afraid to challenge ideas she disagreed with, even when they came from her co-leaders. However, Sarah also found herself dealing with imposter syndrome, sometimes wondering if she truly deserved her position. It was during a late-night conversation with her parents that she had a breakthrough. As she listened to them express their pride in her accomplishments, Sarah realized that her success was not just her own. It was a validation of her parents' sacrifices and a step forward for her entire community. As the three of them worked together to shape the Institute's curriculum, they often found themselves sharing these moments of reflection. They realized that their personal growth was inseparable from the changes they were trying to create in the corporate world. Victoria learned to temper her drive for results with patience and empathy. Marcus found a balance between his passion for change and the pragmatism needed to navigate corporate realities. Sarah discovered that her unique perspective was not a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be celebrated. Together, they were learning that true inclusivity wasn't just about policies and programs. It was about creating a culture where everyone felt valued and empowered to contribute their full selves. This growth was not always smooth or easy. There were still moments of conflict, times when old habits resurfaced or when the enormity of their task felt overwhelming. But they had learned to approach these challenges with honesty and openness, seeing them as opportunities for further growth rather than as setbacks. As they prepared for the Institute's grand opening, Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah took a moment to acknowledge how far they had come. "We're not the same people we were when this all started," Marcus observed. Victoria nodded in agreement. "We've grown, just like Skyline has grown, and I think that's the key. We have to keep evolving, keep learning, and keep pushing for change," Sarah added. "Not just in ourselves, but in the world around us." As they stood together, looking out at the Skyline Institute that represented their shared vision, all three felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. They had not only transformed a company and launched a movement, but they had also transformed themselves. And in doing so, they had proven that personal growth and corporate change could go hand in hand, each fueling the other in a powerful cycle of positive transformation. The grand opening of the Skyline Institute for Inclusive Leadership was a momentous occasion. As Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah stood on the stage, looking out at the diverse crowd of corporate leaders, employees, and community members, they felt the weight of their journey and the promise of the future. Victoria stepped up to the microphone, her voice strong and clear. "When we began this journey, we thought we were just solving a problem within our airline, but we discovered something much bigger: the power of inclusivity to transform not just a company, but an entire industry and beyond." Marcus followed, his words resonating with personal experience. "This institute stands as a testament to what can happen when we open our minds and our hearts to different perspectives. When we embrace diversity, we unlock potential we never knew existed." Sarah concluded the speeches, her confidence a stark contrast to her former self. "Our story proves that change is possible, both on a personal and a corporate level. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. We hope that this institute will inspire and equip others to embark on their own journeys of transformation." As the ribbon was cut and the doors of the institute officially opened, the three of them shared a moment of quiet reflection. They had taken a crisis, the unjust firing of an employee, and turned it into a catalyst for profound change. Their story had become a powerful example of how adversity could be transformed into opportunity, how individual growth could drive organizational change, and how a commitment to inclusivity could lead to innovation and success. The Skyline Institute stood as a symbol of this journey, a bridge between the past they had overcome and the future they were helping to create. As people began to file into the building, Victoria, Marcus, and Sarah knew that this was not an end, but a new beginning. The next chapter of their story, and the stories of countless others who would be impacted by their work, was just beginning to unfold.